Federal Reserve Board Vice Chair for Supervision, Michael Barr, testified before the Senate Finance Committee on the health of banks and, well, an early assessment of the disaster of Silicon Valley. I think they'll have an official postmortem a little bit later. But so far they're saying it was, quote, a textbook case of mismanagement. But that seems to be a severe understatement. Joining me now, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton. And Tom, I know Judicial Watch, I watched one of your videos. You're doing your own investigation. I just want to know, how confident are you that the Federal Reserve itself will accept any sort of responsibility for its lack of supervision and also maybe the role that massive rate hikes might have played?
Yeah, I mean, we have 8 Freedom of Information Act requests already out on this issue. And, you know, when Barr talks about mismanagement, is he talking about federal agencies responsible for overseeing these banks? Is that the mismanagement? There's not a dollar that flows out of these banks these days without the feds having oversight or a hand in it or supervision. And the idea that this just imploded and no one in a position of supposed authority in the federal agencies responsible for supervising the banks had any idea does not comport with reality.
Right.
And what's going on with the bailouts to date, and this is the evaluation, I think, taxpayers and those who end up paying for this at the banks when their fees are increased to cover the costs and losses of SVB and other banks, is all these decisions are political. I mean, these are politicians making political decisions. The bailout, which in my view was unnecessary of SVB, only took place after Democratic politicians in California harangued the Biden administration to do something.
Yeah.
And then the next so-called bailout, which I call a takeover, the Signature Bank, looks like it was more about dinging that bank for investing in a politically incorrect investment area, which is crypto, as opposed to any, quote, systemic failures. And we've done previous investigations on the last big bank bailout system.
Right.
One of my favorites is the Treasury Department top official saying, we got to bring in the top banks. And in the next breath, he said, well, who are the top banks? They didn't even know who the top banks were.
Tom, you talked about the folks who were involved in this, particularly politicians, but that weekend, you have folks like Ackerman, one of the wealthiest persons who ever lived on the planet. They were openly lobbying on social media for this. And it turns out this bailout, the top 10 deposits held $13.3 billion. $13.3 billion, just 10 accounts. And I dare say that they had nothing to do with small businesses meeting payroll, right? I mean, they sold it to the public as somehow they were coming to the rescue of folks who, by the way, were already covered under $250,000. The small businesses could make payroll. What do you make of just the billionaires that were bailed out in this? And I mean, how can we have trust and faith in a system like this?
No, especially since this bailout seems to have expanded to all depositors. So it's $19 trillion at least in potential new liabilities, depending on what day of the week it is and what Yellen's saying. And again, what's the mismanagement? Right. The bank or a company who kept $50 million or hundreds of million dollars in the equivalent of a checking account in just one financial institution? That's where the mismanagement is, and we shouldn't be bailing those folks out. They need to be taking haircuts, to put it mildly.
Hey, I got 30 seconds, but I want to squeeze this in because moments ago, FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried, he's been charged with bribing Chinese government officials with $40 million. And I guess when it's a Chinese official's bribery, when it's Americans, it's just spreading influence. Your thoughts?
Well, that's right. Well, going back to the first story, guess who benefits from the bailouts as well? Our friends in China. China-owned entities. SVB was a well-known partner of the Chinese Communist government. So they get it on both ends for the Chinese communists. They get bailouts and bribes.
I guess they're not adversaries after all. Maybe President Biden was right. Thanks a lot, Tom.